as you'll see today, Gary's going to demonstrate, he's demonstrating how to let go of a no and then be creative in taking a new path. So I first noticed, Gary, when you have an online business, there's lots of places you can learn how to run an online business. One of those is a gentleman named Jeff Walker. He has a program called Product Launch Formula, and it shows you how to build a product online and then sell it to the world, kind of thing. That's his whole thing. He's been doing this a long time, since the early 90s. He's sort of the granddaddy of that thing. A lot of coaches in the online space, like Evan Pagan, who you probably heard me talk about, he's my coach. Jeff and he are peers. So when I first met Evan, well, actually Evan's wife, in person, it was at Jeff Walker's event. So like they're buddies, they do everything together. Jeff Walker's been around a really long time. I had already been trained, but everyone talked about him so much. So I'm like, I'm going to take his program. I actually had already learned what I needed to learn from Evan, but I met a lot of people, including Gary. So Gary was in that program, and I remember seeing you in that program. And I remember, so it had its own Facebook group, just like we do. And Gary was writing, I don't remember, maybe you can fill it in. Gary was writing something about wanting to do something in screenwriting, like he's figuring out his product. So that, like we do here, right? Where we're figuring out what kind of client you want. People are figuring out what kind of product do they want. When I first started this, I was in the haunted house business. I had an online business that was build a monster business. It was before we even had the idea for Hollywood Gatekeepers. So I was in that. At that point, though, I had moved on to Hollywood Gatekeepers. But so we were figuring things out. And so Gary, and maybe you can fill it in later, but he did something about Hollywood, and he got bombarded with people like, no, you can't do it. A bunch of people who don't know a thing about the industry. We're in the industry. These are people that have online businesses and all kinds of things, like dog training and like health and just all kinds of stuff. Suddenly they all became experts in Hollywood, and they all were shooting them down about how you have to be an Oscar winner to blah, blah, blah. And I was just like, oh, smokes. And I remember messaging you. I don't think I commented, because I didn't want to have an argument, people. I just wanted to talk to you. And I think I messaged you and said, don't listen to those people. You can do whatever you want, or something. I don't remember. So that's my first inkling of you. And then I wasn't even sure when you came into the program if it was the same person. Like I didn't know you were in London. I didn't know much about you. And then you told the story much later. So now I'm going to let you tell the story, and then let's talk more about what you're doing now. So let me spotlight you, see if I can see you, and I'll join you in that spotlight so you're not all.
Yeah, I'm not massive. My massive face is on the screen.
Do it. Let's see. Spotlight. There we go. There we go.
There we go.
Hello, my friend.
Hello.
So now you tell your side of the story.
All I remember is it was one of because with Jeff's coaching program, you get like a coaching call every week, and it was Tuesdays. And Tuesday, I think it's still on Tuesdays. Tuesdays is the only day I go out to work. So I hadn't been on many calls, and like the one call that I go on, because I think it says in the email like who's gonna be joining them, and there was something to do with Hollywood, and I'm like, I want to get on that call because that's what I want to, that's what I was interested in. And so I heard Caroline talking, much as she was, she always does, and talking about herself and talking about her course, and I was like, I want in on that. And I did look the other day. I feel it was 2019, but I think maybe that's when I joined PLF, because I did what a friend did. I had the money, but I didn't join that year, and then I didn't really have the money, but I wanted the program, so I joined and I paid monthly, like for the PLF thing. And then I went over to Hollywood Gatekeepers, and I think your course was open, so this was 2020 when I joined the Hollywood Gatekeepers. And then I think I tend to collect online courses, which is not good. And it took a while to kind of go through it, but I started going through it slowly, and I was like, there's so much stuff. But I jumped on the course for the sole reason to get to know Carolyn, and that was so I didn't, because I've been doing this for, it's 20 years now, so it must have been 17 years at that point. So I made a number of short films and everything. So I kind of knew what a reader was and everything, and I actually started my career reading, and I read 10 scripts for a company called Rain Dance. and
Oh, right.
they don't use agents or managers. They it's just like an open submission,
Yeah.
and I am quite a slow reader anyway. I'm like dyslexic, which is dyslexia but with numbers, and I'm quite a slow reader. But I kind of decided reading 10 scripts. There was like two that I thought were good, and they called me like a really intuitive reader, but it was something that I didn't want to do at all. And I fed back to them on each script. But I did like 10 scripts and I was like, I can't do this because this is taking way too much time. And I think maybe that's something that I shouldn't have been as conscious of than I was. I probably could have had a conversation with them since said, I want to read more and just kind of explained. Because I did kind of enjoy it, but I think you were just getting like scripts. So I in a reader for like 5 minutes, and read like 10 scripts and did the reports. And then I got on the Hollywood Gatekeepers course, and there was like loads of stuff, and it was really good stuff, and it was like really like detailed course. And so I started looking through and watching all the videos, and I still learned a lot. But every time it's like a reminder because you hear things like 3 or 4 times, and on the fourth time you get, oh, that's why, you know. Um, so yes, and then I started going through the course, and it must have been, is it serendipity? Is that the right word? But when I applied to be an intern, I was 44% into the course, and it's like the criteria was to be like 40% or over into the course. I was like, I qualify for that. So I just filled it in and just kind of didn't expect anything because I'm in the UK. But yeah, and I remember this, and I was going through the values. We had a list of values and we had to fill in, and I was trying to think, what was Carolyn's values? I know she's spoken about this, and I was trying to remember. And I couldn't remember. And in the end, I just filled it in. I was trying to second guess, and that is not a good thing to do. So I just filled it in, and then I saw the email that I saw like in the I didn't even click on it, but I just saw the word congratulations, and I was like, oh, click on that, and I was selected as an intern. So it was just almost something that I applied to on a whim, and I want to say that's quite a lot. Certainly in the early days, I applied to a lot of stuff like that and I got it. And along those same lines, if ever you hear like somebody hasn't got enough applications, then apply because it means like they haven't got enough applications. If they extend the date, if they extend the deadline, then it means they haven't got enough applications. So if you ever see that, then just apply for that
Yes.
thing. So yeah. So I yeah. So
Good.
all right, yeah. And now I've
So much to unpack.
yeah,
So
yeah,
this could
yeah.
be a total drinking game. But listen listen to how many times he says something to the effect of, I just tried, I just called,
Yeah,
that he just took action in some way. And so I absolutely love, there's so many things about this. Like you knew the reader thing that probably wasn't for you, but that wasn't your ultimate goal. You wanted to get to know me. You knew that you were like, I want to
yeah,
work with her. And now, I mean, we
yeah,
are working together, not just
yeah.
like it's completely changed.
And
So
that didn't happen straight away either. That was a
no, it took
while. So
years. Hmm.
yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. But because you can, I know you said before, you can see people's progress in the course and say how far. So I was doing it, and then one of the things is every time there was a gap when I didn't do the course, and then I felt like I had to start from the beginning. So again, that's why it took a while. But then you had 2.0, and it was like much better, and like I can do this now. So
Yeah.
yeah. And
Yeah.
that's what I love actually, because you listen to your audience, and most people wouldn't figure out the time to do that, but you listen to the audience and you kind of redid it, and it's like
Yeah, we
so
did.
many people wouldn't
So
do
many
that.
people were getting stuck halfway through and then
Yeah,
starting over, and we were like, this can't be, we gotta, and that was we at the time we were like, and I announced it. This was something that I kind of have sort of learned. I get excited, I announce things too soon. So we announced it really early on, and then it took months and months, like a year really. And so it was like, oh, I'm so sorry, this is taking so much longer, but it was so worth it because people are getting through the course now. And Sheree had a huge hand in that. She was really like, no, we got to make this so people can get through it. So it was
yeah,
2019 that I was in PLF, and I was only in it for a little while. Kind of like, he said I collect online courses. That was another thing that we connected on, is when I talk about Amy Porterfield and I talk about, he's in the course, like he knows like deeply what I'm talking about. So that was something we connected on as well. And in product launch formula really was early enough on that we had kind of just started, and I wasn't sure that we were doing things right. And so you could submit videos in and then go to the conference, and they said that they would pick a few videos and critique them. So we submitted a video, and then and it was so great. And then Doug and I went to the live thing. And so we submitted this video. It was one of the first times I went to a conference representing Hollywood Gatekeepers. So I was very nervous. And then I heard that our video had been selected to get critiqued once we were there. And then, so that was in Phoenix, Arizona. On the same day that they were critiquing videos, my nephew was getting married in San Diego. So I got on a plane early in the morning. I flew down, I went to my nephew's wedding, and then I jumped on a plane and came back in hopes of making it back in time to be able to see the thing that they critiqued. It's like I'm running in the kind of late afternoon, and I look over and I see Doug across the room. He's like, haven't done it yet. And I was like, yes. And I read it, and it was the last one. They ended up doing the last one, and the reason they did the last one is because it was he presented it, and we didn't know this was going to happen. He presented it as, this is how you do it. And so it was the most gratifying, like validating thing that we were on the right track. We were already starting to listen to you guys and trying to figure stuff out. So that was it was a big deal, a big turning point, I think, in the business of like getting this man, like Jeff Walker, standing and being able to he was like, where are you? And I got to stand up and we talked about it. And it was just, it was a super gratifying moment. And I think it was after that maybe that he started having me talk and using me a little bit. And like, once they find someone that has a business that's going, they want to show others, kind of like we're doing right now. So that already we bonded on that. And so, but I've noticed throughout, as I get to know Gary better, so he came in as an intern. We're trying to get our YouTube channel sorted out. And then that kind of morphed into more conversations. And I am going to do, this is a pre-announcement. We don't have dates set yet. We have a tentative schedule, but we're going to host the podcast together. So that's what's come out of this, is now we're going to relaunch the Hollywood Gatekeepers podcast with Gary and I co-hosting, so that we have across the pond. Like, there's so many great things about that. Yeah. And definitely. Boom shakalaka. To me, like, that's how it's done. So that's just one story. And to me, that story is a drop in the bucket compared to some of the other things that you're doing, and that the people that you call and the stories that you have of like, so I just called the guy that runs the thing. So let's talk about your grant for the film installation. Let's talk about the steps that you went through. Tell that story.
Yeah, so I was thinking about this actually. So we should preface this by disappointing everyone and saying I'm in the UK. I don't think you can apply for Arts Council England from America, but you can link up with British artists and think about it that way, maybe. But I was trying to get into film, and I'd written a screenplay, and it was a coming out thing, and it wasn't very good. And I eventually got it down to like 46 pages. But I spent a long time in my 20s trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And I knew I wanted to be a writer, but I'd go for long walks and kind of with a little notepad and just kind of, I don't know what I want to do, and just kind of think about stuff. But then I saw in 2002 there was a film installation in we have Tate Modern, which is like one of the big art galleries in the UK, and there was a Finnish artist called Aija-Liisa Attila, and she had a load of film installations in the gallery, and I went to see that because I was like, I've never heard of this woman. She's a Finnish artist, and actually, as an aside, I got to speak with her on this project by Zoom. Again, I just emailed her to ask if she'd mentor anyone, and she said yes eventually. Like,
That's the other thing, the other drinking. Yeah. So we've got one guy eventually
polite persistence. She teaches at the university as well, so it was like, can't do it now. And then just every now and again I'd email her, and I put her in 2 applications. I put her name in, but I saw her films, and I was like, if that's art, then I want to do that, because it was these amazing film installations. There was a double screen film called Constellation Service, and it was technically a narrative film, but it was like the narrator was the neighbor who was walking his dog, and the couple were splitting up, and then they were in therapy together, and at one point she disappeared like in pixels. It was like really weird, But I was like, Arts Council funds something like this, so I'm going to do that. And then I started writing these short films as like multi-screen things. And then there was um, an opportunity to with a group of people, a group of disabled artists, and I applied for that. And again, I heard they're not getting enough applications, and I didn't know, I didn't have an idea, but a friend said to me they're not getting enough applications, and I did like a really quick application, and I got funding to make this, and that was like my first sort of split screen film, and then I just kind of went from there. Um, yeah, and now
When was that?
um, so that was 2005, 2006. And then, yeah, so I've made a mix of like artist owned video and narrative film. And then you get to like narrative film, which is more film for the movie theatre, cinema. And then it's like they don't fund that. So it's like then you're in kind of the British Film Institute, which is kind of hard to get into, or self-financing and that kind of thing. But yeah, the latest film is about me being a carer for my mum who had Alzheimer's, and she died last year, which is kind of, I always preface that by saying it's kind of fine, which it kind of is because I looked after her for 7 years as an only carer before she went into the care home. But I knew that Arts Council liked things like this. They did a friend's play a while back, which was the play on stage, but it had video of her mother in the background. So that was really interesting. And I was looking for a project that I could do during the pandemic because I was at home and trying to think, and I had all of this phone footage of me at home with my mum and trying to figure out, well, that must be something. And so what because I've had funding for theatre and for film installation. So in the application, I always call it like film installation or film work. I never just call it a film. But also, they don't see a script. So you kind of have this weird application where you're describing what this thing is, but there's no script or there's no outline, or you're just answering these questions. And so I was kind of not careful what I called it, but I wanted to call it like a collection of mobile phone footage. And so yeah, and so I applied for that in 2021. So I um as the drinking game talking about lucky, or I'm always surprised at how successful I am. I'm always surprised when I'm successful, but I applied during the pandemic, so Arts Council completely closed all their grants, and they went through a like £2,500 individual grant basis. I got a grant for a play in February 2020, like a full grant before they completely shut down, and they paid the money in the bank the day before they completely shut their grants system. And then I got another, and that was the second time of that application, which is the same project. And then um, November 2020 or October 2020, I got another grant because they reopened their full grants. And that was to talk and interview disabled artists on their access needs and stuff. And that was the third time that I applied with that type of project. And that was just like the right time for that. So that was all done online interviews. And so, and you see, so yeah, and then in 2021, I applied for the film about me being a carer for my mum. That got rejected. And then I put it straight back in. I don't know. Well, we had a gallery interested by then, a Fabrica gallery. So then the second time that was selected, and that was to show it in Brighton. And yeah, it was really good. It was like a 4 screen film installation. And the gallery was really good at showing, letting us, they didn't want to see a completed piece. They were like, show it as a work in progress and get feedback. So we showed it as a 4 screen installation, which was really good. And people walked inside it, and they we had like present, past, near past, later past, and photos on each screen. But what the way the audience was watched it was what as one screen came on, the group watching all turned as one. So it was like they were kind of interacting in this space. So it's really interesting. But what we had with that also was it was a gallery saying this is really interesting work. We want to see that. So I then applied again for to develop it, I guess it was, and to show it in Slough, which is another a place near London. If anyone's seen the British version of The Office, like the opening credits, that's Slough. It's not a great place, but there's lots of money that is floating around because they want to develop this place. And so yeah, so that then got funding on the first time. And then last week, I think it was last week or 2 weeks ago. So that was the second time I got funding. And Arts Council have a thing where regional things are under 30,000 and national projects are over 30,000. And I think 2 weeks ago now, I just got funding for my first national project, and that's to take the film installation on tour. So this is the first time I've had 3 grants for the one project. And we're not changing the film in any way. We're making like an all audience version because there was swearing and it's kind of, there's quite medical details in it. So we kind of, I don't know if it's annoyingly, I don't call it a family version, but I made it like an all audience version because we're not sure where the venues, it might be like in the foyer where anybody can walk through. And with that, it's like we don't want it to be censored. We want people to kind of see it. And also it's especially because I didn't even think about this, but I was still caring for my mum at the time of making this film. So I kind of ended up having to hand over to this producer as someone else who I got involved through polite persistence. And yeah, and he kind of became the perfect person to actually edit it as well and everything. But yeah, that's crazy now to think that I would have like been doing this thing and also editing video of me because I thought it was just going to be mobile phone footage, but it became more than that through involving other people.
Yeah, yeah, really the
A very
collaboration.
long answer to your question.
Yeah, well, and no, it's great. It's such a great story, and there's so, I mean, again, like all your stories, there's so much to unpack. Persistence, though, is definitely a theme, and it's the idea that the first one was like I think you said like 2005 and then also that you got rejected, so you just resubmitted. I absolutely
Yeah.
love that. Most people, when they get rejected for a grant, they're like, oh well, and they just don't go back. Just resubmit. As a matter of fact, you'll often have the same people reading the next year, and they'll be impressed with the fact that you're not giving up. That's how you get known. And then it will be like, oh, there's so and so again. Oh, there's so and so again. And that's definitely, I have a friend who just did a TED Talk, and I think he went like 5 times, I think he auditioned until he finally got one. And so it's like and he just kept working on it. He just kept tweaking it, working on it, tweaking on it, working. And the other thing that happens when you start writing grants, you start to figure out it's a different kind of language. So that's another thing that we connect on. And I saw your comment there about wanting to attend a class about grants, Meg. So I went through a phase. So I was reading, and started caring for my mom. She came to visit me. She fell, broke her hip, and I was caring for her. My son was a toddler, and it was a lot. And I noticed that my coverages were getting snarkier. I was not, so I was like, I need to take a break. I need to take a break from Hollywood, from this world, and just like care for my family. And so during that time, I started fundraising for people, just like finding, I had a good friend of mine was the CEO of the local YMCA. And he was like, I have a job for you if you want it. And I was like, well, I could do that part-time and help out the Y, whatever. I didn't even know what YMCA stood for. I know nothing about the organization. It was just like, it was helping out a friend, right? And so I kind of got involved in that, and that ended up being the perfect little segue while I was caring for everybody. And so I didn't have to go back and forth at all. I was still reading and working with producers, still writing, but not, I mean, I was working for like 15 different companies. It was insane. The schedule that I was keeping, it was impossible to take care of my family and do that. So, and I was getting burnt out. So I wanted to take a break. I started writing grants, using your skills as a writer. You guys are writers. I mean, it's such a coveted skill. Now I really see it. And that all that grant writing and all that raising money, I became the chief funder in terms of asking people for money because I just didn't have a problem with it, like whatsoever. I could ask people for anything. That was never, I don't know why. Maybe from being an actor. I don't know. But it was such a, and it's the same thing like what you're doing of like, oh no, okay, well here it is again. Oh no, all right, well here you go.
I
Here's a
changed
little bit
3
of a different.
words. Here it is again. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Lowered
So
the budget slightly.
Yeah, and it's that same thing we talked about right at the very beginning, where the no isn't a no. The no is just like, okay, not that person, not that time. But here it is again to maybe a new person or a new time, and I've tweaked it and I've learned and I've grown. And the application, also morphs and changes as you get better at anticipating what what they might need. And the way that he also said, filling out the application for the internship, what were Carolyn's values? I love that. And it's like we're constantly saying to you guys, when you go to reach out to production companies to read for them, you're not telling them, look, I mean, he could have come in and said, I'm the greatest guy ever, and here's all the things, and all those things would have been true. But instead, he's like, well, okay, what are they looking for on their end? To be able to say to the producer that you want to work with, here's what you need, and here's where I can fit what you need. To be able to see where are they at, and he at that point, you knew kind of a lot about us. You've been here for a little while. We got PLF, all that. So, and now I absolutely love. You've got a narrative film. This could have easily been a narrative documentary that no one ever saw of your mom. And it's also talk about making lemonade in terms of caring for your mom, which is really difficult. To have the foresight and the kind of heart to be able to tell her story in this way. It's such a win-win-win in terms of it honors your mom, it honors your relationship with her. It gives another purpose to caring for her, so that it isn't just because it's hard to care for a parent. And so it adds another level of, like, I don't know, creativity to it that makes it eases a little bit of it somehow, even though it's still extremely difficult. But so many people would have, just filmed the thing and done a documentary, but instead you were like, they're doing this, and look what she did, and that's cool. And so now it's on the road. The whole thing's on the road for lots of people to see. It's so cool.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, because you would be working for the producer, not the producer working for you. Totally. So when does the tour start for it?
We're thinking, because of course I'm going on a writers retreat in May, and that's where the first date was. So potentially the first date is 4th of May, or I'm doing a workshop. So each tour has like a live element, which is either a workshop or reading. So in the film, I read from my diaries. So I'm potentially doing a workshop in a place called Barnsley in the north of England. On the 4th of May, but hopefully that might move towards the end of the tour. So in May or June.
And what will the workshop be?
So it's exploring how to make art out of your own life, especially for carers, and how to express themselves. It's very my story. So I got in the film, there's someone else, a friend called Ming Ho, who talks about her own experiences of being a carer for her mum. And then we've got a scientist, and that's the other thing. So I got to talk to a scientist about Alzheimer's. Who else does that? Because I had the funding, and it's like, oh, I could. Let's see who I can talk to, and that's so sees in the film as well. But yeah, the idea is that we get lots of carers' input, and then their story would kind of end up in the film as well. So it's not just my voice.
Well, that's the thing when you can bring the experts in. I think that may have been what I even said it in the PLF thing when people were attacking you. It was like, you don't have to be the expert. If any of you can be the person that pulls other people in. You don't have to be the one. Because if I remember right, people were attacking you for not being a professional in the industry. That's the funny thing, is that people use winning an Oscar. Like, you haven't won an Oscar, you can't teach screenwriting or whatever. And it's like, those don't go together. Like, that's not the thing. It's like, not every Olympic coach is an Olympian. Not every vocal coaches is the best one. Vocal coaches are not pop stars. Like, you can be an expert in one particular aspect of something without having, the other part of it. So but you're taking that, and now there's so many. I mean, it just opens up the world of opportunity is so huge in terms of different kinds of art installations that are film based and film related. We could do you could do a whole thing on grants, how to write grants, get grants, fund your films, fund your thing, like all of that. How to meet the people you want to meet through documentaries. Do a documentary about Michael Jackson's dancers. Do a documentary about something that people are interested in, and then people will talk to you. If you come to someone with an open heart and really enthusiastic, they'll want to talk to you about their lives in general. Not always, but in general they will. So if you pick some kind of topic, like that's another thing, using caring for your mom, and now having access to all these scientists that can help your mom too. And you're learning things about how to help your mom because you're interviewing these people for the film.
Yeah.
It's like, it's just like
Yeah.
the levels,
Yeah.
the layers of potential, any one of those you could pick and
Yeah.
run with. But
And
meanwhile, you're writing screenplays too.
yeah.
So,
So,
I love
and
that.
that's the other thing, because even a friend said the other day, it's like, you have to keep it like really simple in an application, and you're telling a story.
Mhm.
Even if it's an application, you're still telling the story, because they're like readers.
Mhm.
They get so many applications that you need to keep it like as simple as possible for them to understand what the project is and like what you want to do.
Impact.
And also, it's like this is probably quite specific for this, but it's like, who are you wanting to work with? So it's not just you making that work. It's there's other people, and I think that's quite important as well. So it is kind of finding those collaborators, but that could come at a much later
Mhm.
stage.
Mhm.
So yeah,
And so it's I mean I have so many examples of just offhanded conversations we've had about random things, singing,
yeah,
like random things where he's been like, well, I just called the guy. Like, give us some
yeah,
examples of times where you
yeah,
just reached out to someone and made something happen that way.
yeah. So I I just reached out to a producer today, and that took quite a while. That was actually probably, I always like I go into like brain freeze, like I never know what to write. And this is a producer who I got to know, so I've seen her talk a couple of times. So I just emailed her today. Um, so yeah, and like David Parker is the producer on the film installation, and he was working for another organization. And I met him through, like, they did a script to screen, so they talked about short film ideas that we would hopefully end up applying for funding. And so that's where I met him during the pandemic on Zoom. And I asked him if he was doing any other kind of producing, and he was working full time, so couldn't do it. And then he kind of left that organization to become like more independent. And I was like, hey, do you have any time now? Because that's the other thing about timing, because the first application got rejected, and then by the time I got the second one in, he'd left. So, and then he was kind of free to work on other stuff. So that was, again, that was persistence. Brooks Elms, I'm working with. He's my writing coach. So yeah, he said no a few times for a while, and then I saw a tweet. I think it was, I don't know if it was like an ad. I don't think it said ad, but he kind of, I was like, yeah, I just kind of replied on a tweet that could be easily ignored. So I didn't like send him an email. I just like replied to a tweet and said, I'm still kind of interested in this. Like, if you are, like, I probably should have done like a shrug emoji, but I didn't do like an emoji. But he tweeted back, and he was like, yeah, let's have a conversation. And that was a good few months in that, like from the
Yeah.
first time. He didn't think I was right, but he did. Um, he told me about Gary Goldstein, and I think Gary lets anyone in because he let me in straight away. But he's more of a producer, so he had a
Mhm.
producing group, and I don't think he's doing this anymore. But
Yeah, I don't
that
think
was
he
really
is.
good.
Yeah.
But that was really, really
He
good,
produced Pretty
actually.
Woman, for those of you that
Yeah,
Brooks
yeah.
Elms has been a guest here.
Well,
Brooks
that's how
Elms,
I met him.
yeah,
Yeah,
Matt Brooks
yeah,
Elms actually, in a similar fashion, he does a lot of the same things that Gary's talking about in terms of reaching out to people. Brooks reached out to me on LinkedIn. He teaches reading at UCLA. Like, we are we could be seen as competitors. He's a writing coach who teaches reading at UCLA. And totally, I mean, this is the other thing, is it's a really small world. So he reached out to me on LinkedIn and said, I know it might seem like we're competitors, but I love your stuff. We should talk. And I was like, well, who's this guy? Okay. So I jumped on, and he's just the nicest, most human,
yeah,
loveliest man. And so we just immediately hit it off. So if you go on our YouTube channel, there's a couple of interviews. And then he brought in a writer in here. For those of you who've been around for a while, we we all like did a critique of the guy's short film and gave him feedback, and it was really fun. And then Brooks was, I think he was just leaving UCLA to do the writing coach thing. And this is before I kind of knew who you were. And then Brooks and I, we kind of do this, like, the same theme,
yeah,
in terms of, like, we come together, we do some stuff together, and then we part ways for a while, and we come back together. As I'm getting to know him, I realized that one of my writing partners, who's a director, had taken his course. Well, she took his course, and she was coming home, and I was looking at her homework, and I was like, looking through the course, not knowing it was him. And then she's a producer. She'd never been a reader, but she was getting her producing degree, and in order to do that, she had to take this reading class. And so she read the screenplay that he assigned, and then she gave it like a 2 or something, like out of 100. And I was like, no. She's showing it to me, and she said, I gave it like a 2 or like an 8 or something. I was like, what? And I was like, no, you can't give it an 8. And she's like, well, I would never in a million years produce it. And I was like, oh, you're such a producer. You're thinking from a producer's head. A reader doesn't think from a producer's head. They're always looking for, how can I make it better? And she was like, oh, like she didn't kind of get that, because in her brain, she never would spend money on it. She never would produce. That's all she looks at movies about. So she said, that's exactly what he said. Like, he said, you're looking at this like a producer. And I go, well, I mean, it makes sense. You're a producer, right?
Yeah.
Thought that was Brooks. And then it turned out he wrote that screenplay. And I even said in the moment, how do you know he didn't write it? And she said, oh, he wouldn't be giving his own screenplay. And I was like, I think he might be, like, because it wasn't the film we heard of. And then later when I met him, I'm like, did you write that? He goes, yes. It was so brutal. And so, I mean, we just had a good laugh about it. And I mean, it was loving that I was able to tell her, and it was like this great conversation, like, because they got to know each other, because she's an overachiever. So he got to know her because she's one of those people that shows up. So that was coincidental already. And then we were talking about something else. We got together, and he was like, I think one of your students is just, I'm going to coach Gary. And I was like, oh, Gary's great. Because by that time I knew who you were. I didn't know you like I do now, but I kind of knew who you were in our program. And I was like, oh, he's going to be great. Like, you're going to love him. And so, so I didn't know that you got in there, but he wasn't saying at that point you were already in. So it wasn't like he was like, what do you think of him? But that does happen. I mean, he hasn't done that, but it does happen where people go, hey, isn't this one of your students? What do you think? Blah, blah, blah. Can you tell me a little? Yeah, that goes on all the time, because people, want to take a chance, and they want to make sure that they're making the right move. So I absolutely love that you're working with him, because I think that's a really good fit, for one thing. Like, he's also super heart-centered, and just and also an entrepreneur to his core. We get on and we text and stuff. We geek out about marketing together. So Alex Hormozy, do you follow Alex Hormozy? Have you heard of him?
I've heard of the name. Yeah,
that's who we're both kind of following together. And so he's been following. He's a marketer. He's a super intense kind of, well, I want to say bro marketer, but that's a term. He's not really that, but he's very intense and very smart. So Brooks really loves him, and we've constantly like, have you heard this guy? That guy was like geeking out about marketing stuff. But and he's a brilliant writer. And the thing that he's been doing lately is writing screenplays on Twitter. Have you been part of that? Have you seen that?
Yeah, I have. I did actually, I did that. So I was he had Slack. They now moving to Circle, which is a new app. But yeah, so they did these short stories in Twitter, and I did like a wedding thing, like a wedding romantic comedy thing on Twitter, just to see whether it would get any responses. And it kind of, I think it did a little bit, but again, that was really interesting, because the other thing is I also write screenplays, regular film screenplays. So I've written 3 of those, and I love romantic comedy. So I did this whole wedding thing, and it's really interesting, because you have to. And somebody said, I got feedback on the tweets, because I was in the group, and somebody said the first tweet was really confusing. So that was interesting. So it's like copywriting. But on Twitter in like really short sentences. So that was kind of interesting. And so I think it did get quite a bit of engagement, more than I do normally, but it didn't kind of blow up the internet or anything. But it's that first tweet if you're doing anything. So these are like short stories. And there was a guy who was a writer, and he did a tweet about hiring a cabin in the woods. And he had photos and evidence and all of that stuff. But that was his short story on Twitter. And that was really interesting. So it's an interesting way to go. And I didn't do one after that, but I might have another go at that one, actually.
I love that you're experimenting with that. And I know Brooks has been really down that rabbit hole, experimenting with writing screenplays on Twitter. And what Cherie's saying there, you guys, Brooks has the most unusual advertising style. It's worth getting on his email list just to parse out how he interacts with people. He's definitely a one-on-one kind of marketer, which is that is also what Alex Hormozy teaches, which is why Brooks resonates with him so much. But and we've brought on, some of you have met Anthony. Any of you that are in the accelerator program, you came in through Anthony. Anthony is very similar to Brooks as well. The kind of way that I've always wanted someone, I just don't have the bandwidth to do it myself, to do the way that Brooks does this, or the way that Anthony operates, is that just to talk with people one-on-one. What do you need? What do you want? And now Anthony's doing that for us, and it's so fantastic, because then he and we meet all the time. We're meeting this week, and then he tells me what he's learning about people and what you guys need, and he's having the conversations that I wish I could have one-on-one with people. And that's how Brooks does it too. He charges more for what he does and has fewer people. So he charges more, but he talks with each person, like Gary said, like he said no at first, and then being the ever persistent one, Gary kept coming out until finally he said yes.
Yeah.
And so, and it has a lot to do with, I'm sure he's also thinking of the group as a whole. He might have been thinking about the fact that you're in the UK and there's a timing problem, like who knows?
Yeah.
But people that do these small, high-priced curated groups, and this is something that you guys can consider doing as you become a coach, or as you know, whatever you decide to go into, you could do these smaller curated groups and talk to people and have an application and have a, you know, you really, that's kind of, you know, I've been inspired to do Momentum along those same lines of having a curated group where we're making sure that the people all fit personality wise and that kind of thing. So, and if they don't, you pull out the people and let's chart a different one with these people, and you just kind of work it out. And so that's his marketing style. And so, because Gary's such a marketer too, it's like you're seeing things from all these different angles. And then you also talked about just, you're in a lot of different writing groups. Can you explain some of the writing groups and stuff that you're in?
Yeah. So I'm in Brooks's group. I've just finished. So last year I did EBS, which is Entertainment Business School. It's run by Kaya Alexander. And that was really good. But that was 1 a.m. Zooms, which went on for quite a while. That was 10 weeks. And then, so that's really about the business side of the film industry for above the line creatives. But that's how I recommend if you want to learn about the business side of things. And then I said that I wanted to be more involved in terms of video editing and whatever. And so I got a space on the latest class that's just finished. So I had 9 more weeks of 1 a.m. Zoom calls from sort of January. So that's just finished last week. So now I can, well, I think go to bed at a reasonable time, but I have a Zoom at 8:45. So that's been really good. And then Brooks's group, and then the London Screenwriters Festival that's happening this weekend. So I'm in that. I'm pitching on Friday. I need to look at the who the speakers are and who's there to hear pitches. It's I kind of get involved in these different groups, and Dominic Morgan as well. He's actually really good. He teaches. I think you should get him on actually. He teaches people how to write for the reader. So that's really interesting. And I did his course, and that's really good. It's kind of, and I'm adding to my WhatsApp groups quite drastically. So it's like trying to
well, it's cool
manage
because
it, and then remember who I'm talking to and which group they're from.
That's essential.
How do I know you? Who are you?
Don't call Brooks Dominic, and like you gotta make sure. But it also is like that's why the podcast will be so fun, because Gary's so actively in these groups and taking courses. Like you said, that's someone you should have. We have a list of the people that he's been working with. As you know, we're always doing that. When I hear you guys talk about people, you know, we're always as we develop the pipeline, which is, for those of you that are new, it's like once you graduate, you go into our database of readers that can, you know, do coverage. And then we're working on our end. We're giving that pipeline to more people on our end to kind of help promote you. So as we develop that, we want to start having guests come in that will be on the pipeline, so that we can start to sort of specifically say, you know, this person's from Hallmark, Donna Joe, or, you know, like people that we know have a certain, you know, proclivity to a certain thing. We can bring that guest. So I'm like matchmaking a little bit, like, not that it's only for that person. Any of you can read for any of them, but it's like the people that I know have a certain niche that's helpful. So keep us informed, you know, about what you guys are doing. This is why, Heidi, with some of the things you've been emailing us about, the grant situation seems like with some of the things I've heard you talk about, some of the interests that you have and the people you want to work with, grants might be a way that you could go. And because you all have the superpower of being able to write, grants really are about storytelling. And it's the same thing about why are they doing this grant? What is it that they want the world to see? Look at what we're doing. It's not just look at the impact we're making. It's not just about I want to help this filmmaker. It's about I want everyone to know what the Arts Council is up to, right? They're promoting themselves by giving you a grant. So you want something that's going to like show off their organization as being the ones that helped this project. Instead of it being like, give me money for my thing, it's like, let me be something that's going to really help you guys get more donors, get more people wanting to give money to fuel more projects. Like that's what they want. They want projects that are going to inspire people to give more money, to do more projects, right? I mean, everybody's got a stake in what's going on.
So yeah, definitely. And I just like 'cause I obviously knew I was coming on here, but I just kind of looked in America, because I know some people are on Mountain Time, I think, but I looked at just Boulder, Colorado, and they've got an arts board and commission recruitment, but they got like an arts section. LA County has like an arts section on the website. Los Angeles County Arts and Culture. So every kind of wherever you are, every kind of government department will have like an arts body or an arts kind of corner. They might not fund it very well, but there should be one there, and just kind of start with that.
And it
even like
snowballs. Once you get one, then you can say, I got this one. It's like anything. It's kind of Sean just posted. Sean Riley also is someone that's just brilliantly making short films and then brilliantly entering them everywhere. And so she's been entering her short films for years, and then they started winning. She started, and then she would post every time she got accepted into one. It wasn't like, oh yeah, hey, look, I got accepted. She'd do a post of the poster of the movie, she'd create those little leaves, and like I've been selection. She is the official selection of wherever she's doing this. And so you start to see it starts to become a thing where you see her posts of her movie poster, and she keeps adding more and more things to it as she gets selected in other places. You can do this with your screenplay. If you write a screenplay, you can say I've been a finalist here, and you can create a visual image of that with the little thing you have been selected by that thing. And then the more you do that, the more it snowballs, and the more people see it, the more they want it. And now she's at Cannes, like that. She's been selected as a short film at Cannes. She's actually living there now. So it's like she is out there pounding the pavement, and persistence. And she's one of our graduates as well. Yeah.
So there's also just this afternoon, I just thought, ooh, tourism, because as well, like tourism, they want to sell where they're living, they want people there. They need writers, they need stories about,
and there's actually money there.
Yeah, definitely.
The tourism industry is enormous, especially any big city. Is like, and it's very competitive. So they want things that are unique, unusual. So if you have some kind of thing that represents your city, or you have any knowledge, most cities. Like I'm a certified tourism ambassador of Anaheim, and I went and got that certification while we were doing our haunted house, so that it would help. I could get people to come to it. Like it was strategic, so that I could go to these conventions of tourists, the tourism professionals, and tell them, bring your people to Anaheim, and so that we could be part of it. So we became part of Anaheim's. When they would go out to the tourism things in the hotels, they had little Motel 6 Feet Under things in it. Like it gave us all this free marketing. So these are the kinds of things, like I knew this conversation would kind of open up like more ideas. These are the kinds of out of the box thinking. If you know your particular area where you grew up or where your parents grew up, and you want to double down on their hometown thing of whatever that, you can find fun. Cities want to fund things like that. They want to show off their city. They want to show off their own, it's big business, and it's free marketing, and it promotes you. And then when you go to write the next one, or you go to meet with a producer and pitch your screenplay, I mean, think of all the grants he can tell someone that he's got all this credibility now from all these big organizations that have given him money to now when he goes to pitch, well, I've got this happening, and they're going to always say, what else you have? What else do you have? What are you working on? What's going on? They want to get to know you as a person. And so this is all fantastic things that you could share on your pitch session this weekend.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And that's the thing. And with the documentary, the film installation, I was with a manager and he was like, are you writing a narrative film about this? And now I kind of am. It has to be a comedy. So obviously I made it a body swap comedy. But yeah, but that's a way that I think I can write what I've recently experienced to this. And so, yeah. So yeah, things like that. It's all gives you ideas to kind of log or think about or whatever. And I hit the pillow and I have an idea. It's like quite annoying sometimes.
And Gary and I had this conversation, I think, the other day where we were talking about different grants. The thing the beware moment though is making sure that the grant's not wagging the dog, right? Like, so it's not, you're not like suddenly going, oh, I'm going to do this project because they need this in this grant, and I'm going to do this you want to be able to still stay true to what you want to do, but find a way that there's a marriage there so that you're not running around trying, and this is true if you have a nonprofit too, like people will go like, well, they have, like we're the YMCA, well, they have this program and they're giving away $1 million to anyone that can do dog training. And it's like, oh, let's write it. We could do that program. And so suddenly you're adding a dog training program to an organization that's for kids, right? Or whatever. Like you have to make sure that you're not just chasing money for the money, that you're chasing it. You have a plan, like you have an overall idea.
Yeah.
And then you can, like what he brilliantly did, instead of just doing a documentary about his mom, he started watching other people and seeing these other ways to do it and morphed and changed the thing that he had. It's not like you went, oh, I mean, you did a little bit of that where you started writing some short films, kind of getting familiar with that concept. So you could, you have to kind of gauge so that you're not running all over the place. You're still staying pretty focused, but you're able to kind of find these different areas that will expand.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And the other thing that is also useful for a writer, I think, somehow we're all in our screenplays, we're all the main characters somehow. There's an element of us that's kind of in there. So whenever I look at grants, I'm like, where do I fit in? And if I really don't fit in, then I probably won't apply. But if there's some way that I could fit into what they're looking for, then I definitely apply.
It's really good. And it's also so, like you said, where does he get the contact info? Someone asked that. It's about you being, if you're in the groups, you get to know people in groups. That's part of it. Is there any other thing that you do in terms of getting contact?
I have connections that know a lot of people. There's one person I know who's been really good. Actually, she runs her own business, and she shared a thing that was out about Thames Valley investment principles or whatever, and I just added the guy that runs Thames Valley Investment on LinkedIn, so I know where Thames Valley is. I think I've been there once, but he's the guy that is good at investment. So I'm like, I kind of want to get to know him and see if he just accepts my LinkedIn invitation, and he might or he might not. But yeah,
that's the best answer. It's like, well, I think I've been there once. So I think I'm gonna look up the guy and I'm gonna see what he does. I'm gonna see, is there a connection? Have I ever been there? It's not like I mean, we're trying to do that to help with the pipeline. So you have a connection, like we're trying to create connections for you, because this is the thing that I love that Gary's such a good example of this, that we really want to help train you to do, is to just look for the people that you want to work with and where are they, and see, like, can you just get to them? We have Paul Haggis, didn't know him from anyone. I DM'd him on Instagram. Now we had Bobby Moresco. I did know Bobby. So Bobby Moresco had already agreed to come in. So in the message I said, here's my credits, and I know Bobby Moresco, he's been a guest. Would you be interested in being a guest? And he said, of course, no problem. But sometimes I don't. Sometimes it's just like, hey, I even kind of joke and say, what are the chances you would be, how do we do it, Shrey? We say like, you would be thrilled, semi-interested, or willing to be a guest. So it's like, we kind of joke, like, you might really want to do it, or you might be, yeah, fine, you know. And then Jeff Arch was another one that I had met Jeff like a long time ago. I'm sure he wouldn't remember me, but he said, when he was on stage, he said, I couldn't get people to listen to me until I started writing. They wouldn't listen to what I had to say, but they would hear me through my writing. I had a voice in my writing, and that really resonated with me. And so I reached out to him and told him that resonated with me. That made me start writing, blah, 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 you know, just talked about what an impact he had, and then said, would you be willing to come and guest? That was a persistent one. He said, of course, but then time, blah, blah, blah. But then he wrote a book. And this is years later. I've been every few months, I would check in again. Sometimes he replies, sometimes he wouldn't, but we never had it worked out until he had a book coming out. And then I'm like, I know he wants to promote this book. So I reached out again, maybe you could talk about your book. And then that's when he came on. So it is that idea of like, just being persistent, finding the people wherever they are. If they're on Instagram, when you start with producers, looking at contests, looking at grants, looking at places where they might be judges for things, the people that do that kind of thing that are already out there are going to be more, you know, they'll be more open usually to hearing from you, because they're putting themselves out there. The ones that hole up behind their wall and like, they're going to be harder. But the ones that are out there teaching, like, I knew that Paul was already teaching. If he's teaching, that means he likes this. He likes this kind of, you know, environment. So look for those producers that are out there doing things like that. That's why the people on Stage 32 are good, like looking in that way, but also do what he's doing in terms of well, I think he's on LinkedIn. I've been to that thing once. And then tell us about the guy that got the big grant that you were telling me about, the $100 million grant.
Oh yeah. So Kaya said this. So, and I actually reached out to him because he'd done entertainment business school, and he had a really good. His name's David. But he had like a really good, like it's like an 8-minute trailer as the header of his IMDb page, and it was all about the story behind the moonwalk. It wasn't Michael Jackson's thing. There are all these people that kind of did it before him. So yeah, and then he's been going to Cannes for like 12 years, and that's kind of most I think relatively recently he secured 100 million from a single investor that's also with Lloyds Bank of London. So yeah, so I heard that from Kaya, and I was like, Lloyds Bank? Do you mean the one in London? I was like, ooh. So they're like one of the few banks that have a film department, you know, and they used to like almost all the big banks. I think they probably still do. Yeah, like all the big banks normally have like a film, or like they will all have like small business investment side. Yeah, so that's kind of what I'm kind of, yeah, I've been to Cannes twice. It's not my favorite, but that's the other thing as well, because I went to the AFM, the American Film Market, 2 years ago, and I was listening to the pitches, and that was pretty good, but I didn't have anything kind of planned, so I just went to the film commissions of whichever area was giving a talk at that time, because they're really nice people, because they want you to come to them. So I would just kind of like went there. Like I'm now on Nashville's email list. I think they're trying to set up a tax credit system.
Yes, they are.
I'm on New Orleans emailing list. You know, they're all trying to get people to come and film. Florida didn't have anyone there 2 years ago. That was a bit weird.
That is
So that
weird.
was like the
In
first
the
thing.
like 90s, Florida was a huge film market.
Yeah, those were the first people I wanted to go
Yeah.
to, but they didn't have anyone there. I was like, oh, so yeah, I went to some of the others.
Some of it has to do with politics too. So the
Yeah,
people that you get to know when you come into a city, this might sound kind of crazy, but get to know your city council. Getting to know
yeah,
your city council, like literally they're always out doing things. You know, they have political careers. So getting to know them, like I'm actually friends with the Anaheim mayor now because I've just done so many things that, like philanthropically, and she's at so many events. We started to get to know each other, and then it's just like blossomed from there. So then she came on a Zoom call with me and another friend of mine just so they could meet, like just because I was like, you guys need to meet, like. So they're very willing to meet people, and so being and showing that you're civically minded. So when you marry the politics with the film commission in your local area, film commissions, again, they really want to bring people to film there. So if you can get involved with them in some way, even if you help read any projects that they're considering backing or whatever. Just get to know them. They're just people, right? Everybody's got an agenda and wants something done. So you get to know the film people, and then that also parlays into the tourism of that city, which comes right back around to the city council. Tourism and city council are neck and neck. The city manager, the tour, every city's a little bit different, but knowing these heads of what's happening in your city. Almost all cities have like a public comment section at every city council meeting, and you can come up and at least I know this is true in Anaheim, because we have most people come up to the comment thing and complain. They're coming up to say, I have this problem, or you're corrupt, or whatever. Especially now, because it's so volatile, people come up and they just bombard the city council members with bad news. So come to the city council member and just say, I'm just a resident and I'm working on this film and it's going to be about this. I just wanted to let you guys know that I'm I'm such an honor to meet you and to be here and be the light in the room just for 2 seconds. And you literally only get 2 minutes or something, and talk about whatever you're working on.
Let's say something positive.
Yeah, say something positive about your city, about them, how this project that you're working on, or how you're now. I just wanted to let you know I'm here. I've developed my own business as a reader. I actually read screenplays in the community, and I'm looking and loving screenplays that are about our community. Like the people in the room, suddenly that will get out so fast. Then the city council will be out telling their friends about it, because that's really unique, right? People just don't do that kind of thing. And it got to be in our city council meetings, they would, people would line up, they would see me at the back of and you could see them like just waiting for me to come up, because they knew that I was going to come up and say something positive. Like they were just and every time I come up, they'd all like sit up like children, like, yay, here comes the good news. And then I would say something about some philanthropic thing that I was working on, and about how great the city was. And I always did this is the best, we call it the best small town, the biggest small town in the nation is kind of how we refer to it, because everybody knows everybody, even though it's a gigantic city. So being able to find the things out about your city, find the stories that are there, get to know your politics and your tourism and all the things. And there's something that happens when you do that. You become more appreciative of your own community too. You start to become more civic minded. Things start to matter a little more. You'll make more friends in that way. It's really very cool.